Or maybe I haven't been enjoying the weather that much. I know, so sorry about that. You know, socialists can change the world, but maybe we can't change the weather. But I'm also very excited to announce that we have sold over 3,300 tickets for Marxism this year. So tonight's rally, as people have seen, is titled Intifada and Revolution. And we've got a fantastic lineup of speakers here on the stage with me tonight who are going to be speaking here tonight. But I don't have to tell people here this, but Marxism Festival this year takes place in a very important time. You know, this is the first Marxism in 40 years where we are not ruled by a rotten Tory party. This is an election that has sent the Tories and all of their misery, austerity and racism into the dust. But yeah, and now you cheer. But we can't rest on our laurels. You know, now we are facing, you know, a very insurgent far-right threat with the likes of Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Yeah, boo indeed. And obviously the replacement is a new Prime Minister who promises to deliver just about nothing, to be honest. But all of this takes place in the context of a genocide in Palestine. You know, the rise of the far right in Europe and, you know, the crisis really of this system. So our rally tonight and the whole weekend, and over the whole weekend, we will be discussing how we actually break from these crises and how we fight for a better world and a different one. So to start, I think the Palestine movement in response to, you know, the Israeli assault and genocide we're witnessing has been a massive inspiration for everyone. Everyone will have seen the inspirational student encampments for Palestine that have erupted across the globe. You know, first, you know, making waves in the US, and then since, you know, we've seen them all around the world, but also all around this country, all around Britain. And I think now it's important that I just send out solidarity to the encampment that is at this very institution at UCL. But I want to welcome our first speaker, who's not from UCL, but is from down the road. Welcome Haya from the SOAS Liberated Zone.
Hi everyone, I'm here from the SOAS Liberated Zone for Gaza, and today is day 61 of our encampment. So we're still standing strong, we're still standing steadfast, a trait we learn from our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza, and I'm proud to be a student, and I am proud of every single student and encampment across the UK. We are proud to come after a generation of students that succeeded in their movements, for example, during Vietnam in the 60s and apartheid South Africa. We continue to reiterate the importance of our role as students to use our education to make a change, but most importantly, to take action to hold these hypocritical institutions accountable for their complicity in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. We see where these institutions and their priorities lie. We see that rather than condemn the massacres and actively cut ties with genocide, and in SOAS's case, Adam and Habib and his management invest in companies like Albemarle, which invest in producing white phosphorus, shame that they would rather expel students and repress any form of Palestinian solidarity activism on campus. On Sunday, it will officially be 9 months into the genocide, 9 months of torture, death, and destruction of the Palestinian people, 9 months of continuous ethnic cleansing against our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Every day it increases. And how does the world continue to function knowing that modern day settler colonialism is happening in present form? What more is there left to say? These people working in these institutions would rather not condemn the genocide, but rather maintain ties with the Zionist entity. Shame. I'm not going to stand here and read off statistics about martyrs or how many are injured. We have all seen the heinous and barbaric atrocities being committed by the Zionist entity. And the Western media like to use these statistics as mere numbers, but we must remember that these lives are mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, and grandparents, and we will never resort to using these precious lives as statistics to try to elicit compassion from a society that should have already been compassionate since 1948. As an Egyptian as well, as an Egyptian, I recognize the complete betrayal of the Arab regimes, and it's something we don't speak about often in this country. Whilst we must hold the Western regimes accountable, we must know that every single regime in the Arab world have betrayed the people of Palestine. Rafah was bombed multiple times, killing not only Palestinians, but 7 Egyptians and 2 Egyptian soldiers, and there was no condemnation from Sisi, and there were bribes being taken at the border instead of letting our Palestinian brothers and sisters in for medical treatment. This is shameful. This does not represent the people of Egypt, as we know that the people of Egypt and the Palestinian people have always stood side by side. And we've seen, for example, in 2011, during the Egyptian Revolution, the flags of Palestine and Egypt being side by side next to each other. We must know that for the Middle East and the Arab world, that Gaza is the focal point, and that we know that once Palestine is free, all these Arab dictators and their regimes will be under threat. Their positions are currently solidified by their ties with the Zionist entity. But we know that once Palestine is free, all our Arab people will rise, and the entirety of the Arab world will finally be free from Western colonialism. Just like SOAS and the shameful management of Adam Habib, who suspends and is now trying to expel one of his students for speaking up against genocide, these institutions preach that they are decolonial institutions, yet we know that they are hypocrites. How dare you give us readings on Frantz Fanon and Edward Said, yet not actively recognize the blatant settler colonialism happening in Palestine? How dare you? How dare you see decolonization as a mere theory and not an active practice? We will continue to reiterate that decolonization is not a metaphor. Academia is a practice that frees some and shackles others, a practice that guides oppressors and dehumanizes the oppressed. A phase within a process that normalizes oppression and fuels socio-political defeatism. And it is our duty, it is our responsibility for us to change that practice, for us to claim it as ours. The Zionist entity system of institutionalized racist discrimination and ethnic cleansing against Palestinians can only be sustained because of weapons, technology, and other support it receives from companies and educational institutions around the world. And as a student at SOAS, I am ashamed from this institution profiting off of a false image of promoting decolonization to lure students in and then choose to maintain ties with Zionist institutions. We want to point out and emphasize the hypocrisy of administrations and departments across university campuses who have for months, if not years and decades, chosen to remain publicly silent or neutral as they have watched the Palestinian people suffer and be publicly dehumanized and vilified in every conceivable way. Shame! There is a clear attack on education. All universities in Gaza have been destroyed, and members of our communities here have been martyred, such as Dr. Maysara Al-Rayes and Dr. Rifat Al-Arir. You cannot continue to teach on the Middle East and topics such as colonialism, decolonization, and ethnic cleansing, whilst allowing yourselves to become experts and creating extensive and accomplished academic careers on them, whilst choosing to remain apolitical or politically spineless. And you are seeing genocide being enacted in its highest form in Palestine today. It is our job to decolonize our curriculums. We need to popularize the popular responsibility in confronting and deconstructing such colonial schemes and practices. And moreover, it's our responsibility to define how decolonization as a process takes place and work on it as a struggle that we must go through to be liberated. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Haya. Really bringing the energy. I'm sure all other speakers are now like thinking, oh God, what am I going to say? I know you've outshown me, but anyway, our next speaker needs no introduction, really. This is our very own TikTok star, actually, and I'm sure people will have seen him going viral on social media in the Irish Parliament for, speaking out for Palestine and also for ordinary people. So welcome Richard Boy Barrett, who's an MP in the Irish Parliament for People Before Profit, as well as in our city organisation, the British Workers' Party.
Thanks, comrades. Jesus, God save us from TikTok, though. Comrades, I know I don't need to tell you that we've all run out of words for the horror that we have witnessed over the last 8 months being inflicted on the people of Gaza. It's this genocidal barbarism just defies all description. It's taken horror to new and terrifying levels. The massacre of children, the massacre of innocents in their tens of thousands, the systematic destruction of churches, hundreds of thousands of homes, of the water infrastructure, of mosques, of the means to sustain human existence being done absolutely systematically, blatantly, and celebrated by the perpetrators, the soldiers and the criminals who preside over the Zionist regime. It really is horrific beyond any words or any description. And the idea that it is still going on 8 months later when it is happening in front of our eyes, as revolutionaries, we're not shocked by the horrors of capitalism, but I think most of us are shocked that this could still be going on. And it reveals a level of bankruptcy and moral bankruptcy and political bankruptcy and a sort of psychosis in the system that is capable of allowing this to happen or that is perpetrating this. And of course, that is the stock and trade of the Zionist regime. That's what it has always done. From the very outset, it was about, as Cliff used to put it, Tony Cliff, the founder of the SWP, somebody who himself was born in Palestine, that what these people do is go out and create the facts on the ground to normalize the indefensible, to normalize the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in 1948, to normalize decades and decades of ongoing ethnic cleansing, to normalize apartheid, to normalize savage brutality on an ongoing basis against the Palestinian people, to normalize a 17 years criminal siege against Gaza, which even before the events of the last 8 months had reduced Gaza to the level of a permanent humanitarian catastrophe, and now to normalize genocide. The worst crime that human beings can commit, they want to normalize it. But none of this could happen without the active involvement, support, complicity isn't even a strong enough word, the direct involvement of the United States, Britain, Germany, and the major Western powers who provide them with the weapons, who provide them with the political cover and justification and support to continue to carry out this horror and to continue this horror. If the title of this meeting is about revolution, that in and of itself surely is enough to say we need a revolution against a system that is capable of this horror. And of course, as has already been alluded to, how could you not, as we did earlier on, celebrate the decimation of the Tory party that has presided over this horror, that has continued to support and give justification and provide some of the weapons that Israel is using to inflict this genocidal horror. It is a tremendous thing that they are gone. But it is depressing beyond any description that the person who is taking over, Keir Starmer, is somebody who justified the imposition of this horror, who said when asked, was it acceptable to starve people of water, food and electricity, he thinks it's okay. And because of a mass movement forcing him, he comes out with mealy-mouthed words about ceasefire or maybe recognizing Palestine, but we all know that he's going to continue to provide the weapons and the support and the legitimacy to the regime that is capable of carrying this horror out that we are witnessing in Gaza and indeed across Palestine. And that is a depressing fact. That is a truly depressing fact. And people might look and ask about Ireland. Sometimes Ireland is presented as a somewhat brighter light on the horizon of Western complicity with the horror that is being inflicted on the Palestinian people. And it is true, and it's better than what we've got from Starmer or Sunak or many of the regimes, that recently we had the Irish government forced, and it's important to stress this, forced to give recognition to the Palestinian state, to recognize the Palestinian state formally, and indeed have been forced to call into question at least the favored trade status that the European Union gives to Israel. And people should know, if they don't already, the biggest trading partner of Israel is the European Union. Without the essentially associate membership of the European Union that is provided to Israel, the favored trade status, the weapons they get from Germany and other European states, they could not carry on this horror. The Irish government, this is a long-standing demand of the movement, in Ireland is to say that that agreement should be scrapped completely. It is absolutely unbelievable that a European Union that claims to represent civilized values and democracy, and indeed, when it tries to justify its existence, it says that the key reason for the European Union to exist is to prevent the horrors of the Second World War and of the Holocaust, the genocide that was the Holocaust. And yet the European Union is up to its neck in the blood of murdered Palestinians as it continues to provide that favored trade status, those weapons to the regime that is capable of this. But what I want to say about Ireland is it is the mass movement that has forced the Irish government to take even these steps. But they are accompanied, when they talk about the recognition of a Palestinian state, they immediately then go on to say, but we reassert that the only solution to the conflict is a two-state solution. And they refuse to impose any sanctions whatsoever, meaningful sanctions, on the regime that is carrying out these horrors. Now, that is of no use to us. This is just lip service that they have been forced to give, but in reality continue the complicity, refuse to expel the Israeli ambassador, continue to allow trade to carry on with Israel. And to me, this is why it is critically important in arguing, as we build a movement in solidarity with Palestine, that simply talking about Palestinian state recognition or a ceasefire is not enough. We have to say the regime that is capable of this genocide has no place in the civilized world. It has to be dismantled, lock, stock, and barrel. The two-state solution, in effect, legitimizes apartheid. It legitimizes occupation. It effectively does away with the right of millions of Palestinians who were expelled in 1948 and since to return to their homes. That is not a just solution. That is not any solution. And in truth, the two-state solution is simply, as we've seen since the Oslo peace and so-called accords were signed, it's just a fig leaf which Israel uses to continue its process of apartheid, of expansion, of occupation and the seizure of Palestinian territory. So we need to be absolutely clear. The only way out of this is the same way that apartheid South Africa went. The whole regime has to be dismantled. All of the refugees have to have the right to return. And we must absolutely isolate Israel as we did with apartheid South Africa. But we know that will not be done by these governments who are complicit and who have justified this horror. It is only going to be done by the people on the streets, the millions and the billions who have taken to the streets over the last number of months. And that's why mobilizing again after Starmer's victory in tomorrow's demonstration is critically important. Why the student occupations forcing their universities, as has happened in Ireland recently as well, where we forced through occupations a number of universities to break off all their research links and links with universities in the Zionist state. But we have to take it further, and that's the very last point I want to make. We have to build a movement. If we can't trust governments, if they are complicit with this, we have to build a political and revolutionary movement to challenge this rotten system. And we need to win over the hearts and minds of the mass of people who wanted to get rid of the Tories, who are undoubtedly sickened by what Israel is doing, to a genuine project of revolution and liberation. And that is the task for us, comrades. We have to build that organization. Starmer's not going to do it. None of these governments across Europe who mouth sympathy with the Palestinian people have any intention of actually taking the meaningful action necessary to uproot the system that is capable of genocide or supporting that genocide. We have to build a revolutionary socialist organization that will uproot the system that is capable of this horror. And I hope people here are up for building such an organization.
Okay. Thank you so much, Richard. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Maybe you should be up here next year. Okay. Right. Okay, but I want to move on to our next speaker. And I think I'm sure that everyone here has seen the terrible warning and the terrible news from France, where the fascists, Rassemblement National, won the first round of the parliamentary elections last week. But this is not the whole picture. There has also been anti-racists out protesting and resisting that since then, hundreds of thousands of people in France. And that's why I'm delighted to be joined by our next speaker, who is an anti-fascist and a member of the Autonomie de Classe, which is the sister organization of the Socialist Workers' Party in France. I want to welcome Matilda.
Hi everyone. So my name is Matilda, and I'm an activist from France. I came here with 19 or comrades from Autonomie de Classe, and I'm really happy to be here. Sorry for my English. I will try to speak good for you. I'm really impressed also to be here with so many revolutionary people. It's the first time for me, so I don't know how many people there is, but we are a lot. I'm standing in for the comrade who was supposed to speak tonight, but she's sick, so she can't be there. But today is her birthday. So the topics I will speak about is really a bit dramatic. So France is a mess, but there is a lot of resistance going on, and a majority wants to fight. The context is that we are coming off a huge movement against the historic pension reform last year, as you know. The racist laws are multiplying. You understand me? It's okay? Yeah, okay. Against undocumented people and Muslims. They also attack trans people, youth, the precariously unemployed, high school students, hospital, and so on. There is a strong solidarity movement for Palestine, despite heavy repression at first. And also in countries colonized by France, like Kanaki, people are revolting against the Steelers. And finally, the rise of fascism the last few weeks. It can seem scary, but the period opens up an enormous number of possibilities. And it's precisely in this period that our compasses are precious. Argue everywhere for unconditional solidarity against racism, encourage self-organization from where we are. We outnumber the fascists on the street, the demonstration, strikes, and occupation. And I will give some a short example from my activities right now in this situation in France. In my neighborhood in Rennes, in France, we organized a solidarity feast against the RN, the fascist party, on an evening of the first round of the legislative elections. How do we do it? After the dissolution, local residents called for an emergency assembly based on a very simple question: what can we do against the racism? And what emerged from our discussion was that urgent need to act now, but also and above all after the elections, whatever the results. We don't want to stop here. We just can't. This assembly didn't start out of nothing. It grew directly out of an assembly created one year ago during the pensions movement. Revolutionary work takes time, and every little action has value. Since the first assembly, we've met every week. We create a leaflet translated into several languages, leaflet the neighborhood practically every day. We never stop to do something together. And most importantly, we organized a free feast in few days. More than 1,000 people came on the evening of an announcement. And Rennes is a small city, so it was in the south of the city. So 1,000 people came to the evening, and that was a special evening because everybody was so scared. And we stood together against racism. We gained self-confidence. We experienced that it's possible, and we wanted to encourage the auto-organization. Go and see your neighbor, your colleagues, your friend, and let's go do something. You can do it. It's not really difficult, and we need it. We need to be everywhere in the street, in every school, with our family, with our neighbor, everywhere. And look, this Sunday, for the second round in 2 days, there are 3 and maybe more other initiatives organized across the city, in the center, in the north, and also in the countryside, to take collective action against racism and fascism. Self-organization takes time, but it brings concrete results and hope. And politics is us. It's a scary time with fascism on the doorstep, but also a time when a lot of people want to take action against racism and fascism. And it's time of enormous revolutionary possibilities. As a comrade says, we are the solution, that's it, and that's a lot. So thank you.
Oh. Okay, thank you so much, Matilda. But I'm very delighted to introduce our next speaker. We know that a Starmer government is going to bring us very little, and in fact, promising very little and will bring us not much change. So we're going to need a lot more struggle to challenge that. And that's why it's great to be joined tonight by Samara Cameron. Samara is a National Education Union rep who is currently leading a strike in her school.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, firstly. This is my first time coming to a festival, so yeah, really chuffed. So I decided to get into teaching to be a change for our young people, to nurture young minds by giving them what was given to me, which was the ability to make choices. However, rather than focusing on improving my practice and putting my efforts in the classroom, I have found myself concerned about the future and state of education. So much so that being a union representative has somewhat dominated my workload this year. The truth is, the damning effects that the government have implemented have meant cuts beyond cuts and the savage breakdown in what education was supposed to be. There is absolutely no value in education by political standards. They have rid the true purpose of education other than the fiscal business that they have tried to make it. Using children like they are financial pawns has broken down our fabric of educational system. And it is our system. The educators, practitioners, teachers, instructors, LSAs, and parents. It's our system, not theirs. It is currently a system where we are overwhelmed and sunken by league tables, excruciating weight of grading systems by Ofsted, and weighed down by the increase of numbers and so-called standards with no funding to support any of it. Who suffers as a result? Well, it's the children. My context of children are those with additional needs, and in real terms, I'm scared and worried about their futures. To be honest, I almost didn't make it here today because one of my children headbutted me in the mouth. So, that is also a testimony to kind of how challenging school can be, because actually what we're having to deal with are challenging behaviours on the ground and all of the political stuff happening at the same time. But they are being robbed of the equity they deserve, of an education that should be accessible to all. The load of this is best evidenced by my school, whereby the local authority are so pressured because the government won't prioritise education that they're making desperate, unthoughtful, and dangerous decisions. Like, for example, expanding the number of SEN children in schools, particularly my school, like sardines rammed into tin cans. I've had enough, and so have a lot of the staff in my school. We decided that working together is where the strength lies, and we've fought back. We have had days of strike action to counter the awful mistakes that are endangering staff and children. It begs the question, if they are our most vulnerable, why are they getting treated like the skin of milk boiled in a rusty pan? We started off with 23 union members in September, and we have now quickly built to over 100 members. That has led to 4 days of strikes with up to 70 members on the picket lines, and genuine disgust at the way in which the government have continuously underfunded education with no plans in how to rectify this problem. Certainly, if they don't fight for our children, it's up to us. Every time we have had a ballot or vote on taking action and escalation, we have had over 96% every single time. I'm proud to say that my members have placed themselves on the right side of history and continue to make history in our community. Now, don't get me wrong, we have had some concessions, and that's great. But actually, what keeps seeping through is the greed. We wanted smaller class sizes so we can focus on giving children what they need. That number keeps on increasing. We've asked to see where public money is being spent, and we've had radio silence. Where is the justice in all of this? A lot of the children I teach are nonverbal, so my members and I have become their voice. We don't need sympathy, we need action. Why don't they deserve better? We've been waiting on change of government and yet no word on how any party is going to aim to rectify the mistakes made in the past. Now Labour is back in power, we have to see change. We have to see an impactful difference, because doing the same thing over and over and expecting change, well, it's insanity. My favourite quote that my parents taught me long ago was, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Well, a stand is where I am today. The members in my school are also standing together and we will overcome. I'm here to tell you strike action does work, but what works more than anything is unity, actionable unity, putting your walk with your talk. I implore every single one of you to light the fires, set injustices alight. One can do, but many can achieve. Let's keep up the fight to make a change in our world, for strength is in unity and action. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks everyone. And thanks so much, Samara, massive solidarity to you. So before I bring in our next speaker, I want to bring in Jo, who's going to make a quick announcement for us all. So just to introduce her, Jo Cardwell is an anti-racist activist who has been helping organise against Farage and Claxton, for example, as well as against fascist Tommy Robinson. And she's actually part of a group of anti-racists who today disrupted Farage's.
Oh, thank you, comrades. I'm actually come up here today to make a financial appeal to people. I want you to start getting your wallets out, your cards out, and I'm going to have a few minutes to convince you as to why you should give us some money. And it's not very often that I get to start a contribution with, did you see me on the news today? But today I can, comrades, because actually today we went to Farage and Reform's press conference. He wanted to put a marker down, and we wanted to put a marker down as well. Everywhere you go. Because you know what? The mainstream media may want to treat Nigel Farage as some cheeky little chappy, the common sense man from down the pub. But actually what they're doing is they're normalising his racist agenda. But we do not want to normalise his racist agenda. This man, this is no common sense man. This is no cheeky chappy. This is an articulate and astute right-wing ideologue. And we have to take this man seriously. During his campaign in Clacton, he's been advised by a former comrade of Steve Bannon's from Breitbart, yeah? This man has organised with the far right across Europe. This man's organised with Trump so far that we have this rumour that Trump has said that if Farage gets elected in Clacton, when he comes to the UK, the first place he will visit will be Clacton. So that tells you, comrades, that this man is trying to bring this right-wing axis, this far-right axis from across the globe. He wants the UK to join in with this, and he wants to pull us further and further to the right. And we need to take it seriously. And I'll tell you what's interesting, comrades. We've been down in Clacton campaigning against Farage. And not everyone that voted Farage is a racist. But I'll tell you what they are. They are disillusioned, utterly disillusioned. And when we go down there on the megaphone and we talk class politics, and people will listen to you and they'll say to you, all right, I hear you, but who should I vote for? Even the Labour candidate has walked away from Clacton. And that's the shame of it, comrades. Ghassan Abu Sitta was the Labour candidate in Clacton. And he made on this video a statement where he said he felt like he was standing for all black people, standing against Farage. The next moment, that man was pulled from that campaign and told to go and campaign in the West Midlands. It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace because it's a capitulation to racism. And I tell you what, we see, Keir Starmer, we see how you treated Diane Abbott, we see how you treated Faiza Shaheen, and we see how you treated Jovan. Even Neil Kinnock has entered the debate by warning Labour that they should not be courting nationalism. So when you have a Labour candidate pulled and you're in Clacton, I'll tell you what, it's like going into a fight with your hands tied behind your back. And now I want to talk about the difference in the Socialist Workers' Party, because we don't want to tie your hands behind your back. We want to arm you. We want to arm you with ideas and organisation. That's what we have on our side. It's important, comrades, that we have the finances to get out there the ideas. We need to know the difference between right-wing populism and fascism, between Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson. We need the ideas that tells us what the nature of this capitalist crisis is producing in the world today. It's important we know the history of our class, our victories and our failures. We learn from every single bit of that. And then on top of that, comrades, it's important we have organisation. Because you know what, I've had so many little dreams over the last few weeks about what I would do if Nigel Farage was in front of me. And I'd like to think I was big enough and bold enough to take him on by myself, but the truth is I don't have to. Because today, there was 10 of us, comrades, Keir, Andy, Jar, Hussein, Judy, there was 10 of us in that room. And you know what? The difference is this, comrades. I was sitting there thinking, am I having a hot flush or is it the adrenaline that's got my hands sweating? It was the adrenaline and the nerves. But I tell you what made me able to do it was I knew I had all my comrades in that room. We had a strategy. We sat down and talked to each other. We were organised. So if you want to be organised and you want to fight back, join an organisation, fund the organisation. We need to fight together, comrades. The time is now. Okay. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Joe. So now people can see that there are buckets going around the audience. So please do dig deep. It's an important cause. Also, just want to say that if people don't carry cash, I know a lot of us don't these days, there are card machines when you leave. So on the outside after the thing, we'll catch you basically either way is what we're saying. But there's a couple of announcements I want to make while the buckets go around. First of all, is that we are delighted to be joined at this event by Bookmarks Bookshop. Bookmarks are the best socialist bookshop in Britain, and they've relocated their whole shop to Marxism this year. So please go check out their next to no one selection of radical books. You can find them in the South Cloisters in the UCL main building. So don't give your money to Jeff Bezos and billionaires and Amazon. Please do give your money to a bookshop like Bookmarks that fights for the cause as well. The second thing is that there is I'm just taking a reminder that tomorrow is the national demonstration for Palestine. We want at 12 p.m. at Mallet Street to march as a block to the protest. That's a bit exciting. So do make sure you're back by 3:30 because we've got more sessions. Finally, tonight after the rally, I will be heading over to Mully's Student Union Bar. There's going to be a Love Music Hate Racism gig. It's a great time. Please do come. It's nice to hang out with people afterwards, but also we do have a minimum spend. So please do help us hit that.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I just want to come to announcing our next speaker now, so people could just settle down. Right. It is a real honor to introduce our next speaker. Now, many of us here will have seen the harrowing scenes of him on TV, speaking from hospitals in Gaza that have been bombed by Israeli forces. And since then, he has continued to speak out against the Israeli genocide and has been detained in Europe several times for doing so. So we're not silencing him tonight. In fact, we're welcoming him up onto the stage. We are honored and delighted to welcome Ghassan Abu Sitta.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, comrades. Thank you. I think today, rather than talk about the genocide, we need to talk about why Gaza is important for every small and large struggle that the previous speakers have touched on. One of the biggest challenges facing global capital is the problem of surplus populations. Surplus populations that are economically surplus to need, are socially surplus to need, or are politically surplus to need. And we see in Gaza, in order to understand how a world can allow a genocide to continue for 9 months, even though this world's population sees it live on their phones, on their screens. It is because Gaza and the Zionist project are the first stage in which global capital is experimenting on dealing with surplus populations. The genocide in Gaza needs to be defeated, not just so that it is defeated in Palestine. The genocide in Gaza needs to be defeated because genocides will come after Gaza as a solution to politically surplus populations in India, in Africa, in South America, and even in Europe again. And Gaza has always been a laboratory in which global capital has tested out its philosophies, its tactics, and even its technologies in dealing with and managing surplus populations. We saw how over the last 20 to 30 years, Israel really has become a world leader in the development of technologies that aim at managing these populations. And one of the examples that I always go back to is a drone called the quadcopter. Quadcopter drone is a small drone that's probably just the size of this surface area that Israel sends, and usually sends not just into the neighborhoods. During the war, they sent it into the hospitals, and they continue to send it into the hospitals. And this quadcopter carries an inbuilt sniper gun. And one night, they sent it to the hospital, to Al-Ahli Hospital, where I was working, to shoot at the patients and their families as they were trying to get to the hospital. And we had around 20 to 30 between dead and wounded coming into the hospital. Well, the quadcopter is made, what was invented at Tel Aviv University using EU research money, which Israeli universities have as much a right to access as any other European university. It is now owned by a company called Extend, which Tel Aviv University continues to have 40% shares of. And that company now will be in Europe, traveling between the different trade fairs on drones and weapons to raise around 35 to 55 million to highlight its successes in Gaza. And so what we see now, the quadcopters we see today in Gaza, we will see in Mumbai, and we will see them in Kashmir, and we will see them in Sao Paulo, and we see them in Nairobi, and in Springburn, and Easter House, and everywhere else. There are these surplus populations that have to be managed. But also the idea that we return in the 21st century at this juncture, after we've seen this discourse and this narrative about surplus populations in the form of refugees being drowned in the Mediterranean, in the form of economically surplus populations that are having the right to health withdrawn from them because they're no longer needed as healthy workers, the right to education withdrawn from them because they're no longer needed as educated workers. We see this moment in history where genocide yet again is being offered as a solution to surplus population in Gaza. The other reason why the genocide has taken 9 months is that the Palestinian people have defeated the genocide. And that's as the Western media has had begrudgingly to start showing the barbarism of the genocide, the killing, the maiming, over 5,000 children with limb amputations, over 50,000 dead, 20,000 under the rubble. What they still will not talk about is the fact that the Palestinian people have defeated the genocide. What they still will not talk about is that despite all of this killing, despite all of this horrendous and barbaric bombing, over 1,000 tons of ammunition dropped on 365 kilometers square, the Palestinians have refused to leave their country. Despite the destruction of over 80% of homes, there are still around 800,000 Palestinians living in northern Gaza. Despite the starvation and the man-made famine, there are still Palestinians living in Jabalia camp, in Shati camp, all over Gaza. Despite the bombing of the tents, what happened is that people moved from Rafah further back north, rather than, as the Israelis were hoping would happen, that they would leave Palestine. And so 9 months of Palestinian resistance should also lead us to believe that this is where genocide will be defeated. And this is where global capital's view of the world's population as being divided into productive and surplus populations will be defeated. The defeat of global capital in Palestine will lead to the defeat of global capital everywhere. I have to admit, even I, having been born into this, had not realized how absolutely critical Israel is to Western imperialism. More than Taiwan, more than Ukraine, more than any other creation, this seems to be the piece around which the whole system is created. And that explains why, if there's a term that goes beyond the three-line whip, that's why there's a three-line whip at every institution in the Western world, that the editorial boards of scientific journals are towing the line, editorial boards of newspapers, media, editorial boards of football clubs, of FIFA. Every institution in Western imperialism is towing the line, and it tells us that they are defending something that is critical to the functioning of the whole imperialist system. And that is why it is critical to bringing down imperialism that Zionism is defeated in Palestine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ghassan. And thank you so much to all of our speakers. I think it has been a fantastic lineup we've had and a fantastic opening Friday night rally. But now it's time for our final speaker. Lewis Nielsen is the National Secretary of the Socialist Workers' Party, and he's also one of the organisers for Marxism Festival this year. So over to you, Lewis.
Well, look, usually it's tradition at Marxism Festival to save the thank yous for the closing rally on the Sunday night. But I want to start by thanking Rishi Sunak and the Tories for fucking off into oblivion. They say, don't they, that the Tory party are the most successful ruling class party in Europe, and that they've been an election winning machine for 200 years. Not anymore. Not anymore after last night. And I tell you what, to see the party of racism, of British capital, of Food Bank Britain, of Grenfell, of the Windrush scandal, of inequality, of imperialism, to see that party get a kicking in the polls, everyone should be celebrating that tonight. And I'm sure that each of us have our highlight from the election night. It might have been the end of Liz Truss. It might have been the end of Penny Mordaunt. It might have been the end of Grant Shapps. But my sweetest moment was Jacob Rees-Mogg. I tell you, to see the man, the ruling class warrior who looks, who sounds, who acts like he's from 1852, the last time the Tories got such a bad result, to see him sent packing should give us all pleasure. But there is a but, and Joe talked about it. In the celebrations, there's a new danger now in Britain. And that danger is Nigel Farage. That danger is Nigel Farage and Reform. They've got a project to take Britain down the road of Europe, to drag British politics to the right, and they're doing it by using racism, by using Islamophobia, and by demonizing migrants. It is the politics of the gutter. And the way you fight the politics of despair is you need the politics of hope. And if there is one man who is the opposite to the politics of hope, there's one man who could suck hope out of any room. His name is Sir Keir Starmer. Starmer is the man who tells us that there's no money for the climate emergency. There's no money for a pay rise for teachers like Samara. He says that it's not that the Tories are too racist to migrants, it's that they're not competent enough in it. And he's a loyal servant on Israel and imperialism. And I tell you what, that's why one of my favourite moments of election night was seeing Jeremy give Keir Starmer a bloody nose in Islington North. And I'm delighted that Jeremy's chosen to come and celebrate with us tomorrow. He's down on the timetable to be talking about poetry. I think we're going to try and get him to talk about some of the bigger things that have happened in the last 24 or 48 hours. But it's not just Jeremy. Down the road in Holborn and St Pancras, Andrew Feinstein, 20% against Keir Starmer. Very good. Liane Mohammed in Ilford, 500 votes away from getting rid of wedge streeting. And to be honest, our very own Maxine Bowler running a fantastic campaign in Sheffield, getting 8 or 9%. All of those votes are about Palestine, and they're about much more. And they show us that it's possible in Britain, despite the dangers of reform, it's possible to build a bigger and fighting left in this country. And the key question for that left is if it's fighting and if it's building struggle. And that's why I'm so glad that tonight's Friday night rally, we have a panel of fighters on this stage. Everyone on this stage is a fighter. And to be honest, we're going to need a lot more of that because we've got a big fight on our hands. It is a fight about what kind of world we want to live in. Are we going to live in a world that stands by while what happens in Gaza, while a genocide takes place? And it's not even standing by. Ghassan talked about it. It's enabling it. It's funding it. It's sending the weapons. It's sending the political support. 40,000 dead. 4,000 children under rubble. 16 years of a siege of Gaza. 76 years of the Nakba. All of it enabled by the system. And that's why one of the central questions for us at Marxism Festival this weekend is how the movement in solidarity with Palestine can win. And we have to start by saying, you don't win by making compromises. For too long, the Palestinians have been told that they have to compromise with a genocide or apartheid regime, that they have to trust in the peace process, that they trust in the UN, that they trust in Oslo. What's been the result of that? What's happened is that argument to make the Palestinians compromise has meant more apartheid, more ethnic cleansing, and more genocidal assaults. And that's why one of the messages we have to send from this weekend is that if we have learned anything over the last 8 months, it's that the two-state solution is a sham. Oslo is a sham. The peace process is a sham. The only way we will see a just solution for the Palestinians is for one democratic state from the River Jordan right through to the Mediterranean Sea. That's the kind of vision we have to be fighting for. But to be honest, and Ghassan talked about this, there are other fights as well. Because as they send billions in aid to Israel, as they send billions to Ukraine, they tell us that teachers can't have a pay rise. They tell us that there's no money for schools, for hospitals. They tell us we have to accept Food Bank Britain with 4 million children growing up in poverty. And they tell us that we're all in it together. Tell that to Richard Walker, the new donor to the Labour Party. He switched sides from the Tories. He's worth 250 million and he's gone behind Keir Starmer. He's backing Keir Starmer because he knows that Starmer's not going to lift a finger to address inequality in Britain. And therefore, the kind of strikes that Samara talked about, we need to see more of it under a Starmer government. The union leaders will tell us to wait. They'll say, give him a chance. Have you ever, if you look at the poverty and deprivation in British society, have you ever been less inclined to give someone a honeymoon period than Keir Starmer? So we need to see more of that kind of resistance. But the truth is, we can't talk about winning victories unless we take on their biggest weapon. And the biggest weapon at the moment is what Matilda talked about. It's about the question of divide and rule. It's about how they use racism and Islamophobia to try and divide us. Joe mentioned Farage, but look at Europe. Look at Italy, where Meloni, someone who comes from the political dynasty of Mussolini, is now the prime minister. Look at Germany. Look at Germany, the place where the horrors of the Holocaust took place, an organization, the AfD, with a neo-Nazi wing, are polling 15%. And look at France. Look at France, where Le Pen, from a dynasty of fascists herself, can win a parliamentary election. We are closer to the 1930s than we've ever been. But we have to say that we can fight back against it. And what we have to say is that you don't fight racism by compromising it or making concessions. You don't fight racism by saying that there are good migrants and bad migrants. You don't fight racism by saying that some Islamophobia is acceptable, but others isn't. You fight racism by challenging it. And that means we have to build a movement to stop Farage. We have to smash Tommy Robinson on the 27th of July. But we have to say that every refugee and migrant is welcome in Britain, no matter where you're from. But the truth is, the same applies to other fights. Look at the culture wars. Trans and non-binary people are being made a scapegoat in our society. And again, you don't fight that bigotry by compromising it. You don't say there's a debate. You don't say there's a discussion to be had. You don't say you're not sure. You say trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people deserve to live their lives. The point is, if we don't have unity, then our side is weaker. And we've got some big, big fights ahead. And what this weekend is about, it's about saying that all of those fights are linked. The genocide in Palestine, fascism in Europe, the fight against poverty in Britain, climate catastrophe. This weekend is about discussing and debating how do we press the stop button to say we're not going down that road. And we are best equipped to do that if we remember two things. The first is that all of these problems didn't fall from the sky. The children killed in the genocide in Gaza, the children in Zimbabwe starving now because of famine and drought because of climate change, the 4.1 million children growing up in poverty in Britain, all of those problems flow from a system that puts profit before people at every turn. And it's a system that can't be reformed. And the second thing we should remember is that our power doesn't lie in Parliament. It doesn't lie in waiting for Keir Starmer. Our real power lies in the streets and in the workplaces and in the universities. If we've learned anything from the movement for Palestine, it's that getting people onto the streets, occupying their universities, taking over train stations, that's where our real power lies in society. And look, sometimes it can seem like we live in very dark times, but the truth is that if we channel that power, we can find a way out. And to do that, we have to say that we're not going to accept the new normal. We don't think it's normal that while poverty skyrockets and the rich get richer, we don't think it's normal that when the planet burns, Shell and BP are making record profits. We don't think it's normal that refugees are left to drown in the Channel and it's considered a fact of life. And we don't think it's normal that we stand aside and watch a genocide taking place in front of our eyes. We have to say that another world is possible and that revolutionary change is necessary. And the final thing I want to finish on is I want to say that, look, changing the world is not an easy task. Revolution won't happen overnight, and we face an enemy, a ruling class who are prepared to take us over the cliff edge. It's a big battle we've got on our hands. In that battle, the question of organisation matters. And if there's anyone in the room tonight who's not a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, if you join us, we can guarantee you absolutely nothing. In truth. We can't guarantee you what will happen down the line. We can't guarantee you the future. What we can offer you is the hope and the dignity of fighting for a better world, rather than reconciling your heart and mind with the horrors of the current one. That is a vision worth fighting for. Join the Socialist Workers' Party. You're the leadership. Let's fight to change the world.
Okay, thanks everyone. That brings us to the end of this brilliant Friday night rally. Hope to see everyone over the weekend. And remember, there's a gig afterwards in Mully's Bar.